The warning klaxon screamed through the cockpit of the Wandering Star as Marcus Vale fought to keep his aging cargo vessel from becoming a permanent crater on Veloria Prime's surface. Sweat dripped down his weathered face as he wrestled with unresponsive controls, his calloused hands dancing across switches and dials in a desperate attempt to coax life from failing systems. "Come on, beautiful," he muttered to his ship, auburn hair falling into his hazel eyes. "Don't give up on me now." The port engine chose that moment to die with a pathetic whimper, sending the ship into a sickening spiral. Through the viewport, Marcus could see the sprawling desert landscape rushing up to meet him, broken only by the distant outline of a trading outpost that looked about as welcoming as a graveyard. Fingers flew across the emergency protocols, rerouting power from life support to the remaining thrusters. The ship shuddered and groaned, metal screaming against physics as Marcus pulled up to the last possible second. The landing was less of a controlled descent and more of a barely managed catastrophe. The Wandering Star, bouncing twice before skidding to a halt in a cloud of reddish sand. Marcus sat in the sudden silence for a long moment, ears ringing and body aching from the impact. A quick systems diagnostic confirmed what he already suspected. He wouldn't be leaving Veloria Prime anytime soon. Navigation was fried, the hyperdrive was dead, and there was a concerning crack in the fuel containment unit that made him grateful to be breathing anything other than vacuum. Grabbing his emergency kit and the worn blaster at his hip, Marcus cycled through the airlock and stepped onto the desert world. The heat hit him immediately, dry and oppressive, even as the system's binary suns began their descent toward the horizon. The trading outpost he'd spotted from the air looked even less impressive up close, a collection of fabricated buildings and converted cargo containers that huddled together like they were afraid of the endless desert surrounding them. A small crowd of curious onlookers had gathered at what they clearly considered a safe distance. Most were aliens Marcus didn't recognize, though he spotted a few familiar species among the mix. None looked particularly hostile, but none looked particularly friendly either. Just the usual collection of drifters, traders, and questionable characters that populated every frontier outpost in the galaxy. "Hell of a landing," "Pilot," called out a gravelly voice. Marcus turned to see a stocky Taraxian approaching, his blue-scaled hide marked with the ritual scars of a former military officer. "Name's Grex. I run the watering hole around here." "You look like you could use a drink." Marcus wiped sand from his face and managed a grim smile. "Marcus Vale. And yeah, I could definitely use something strong." Grex laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "The Stellar Rest isn't much to look at, but we stock the best liquor within 50 light years. Follow me." The cantina lived up to its owner's modest description. The interior was dim and smoky, filled with the universal sounds of drinking establishments everywhere, clinking glasses, muffled conversations, and the occasional burst of laughter. The clientele was exactly what Marcus expected. Miners still covered in rock dust, traders nursing their profits, and more than a few individuals whose occupations were best left unexamined. Marcus claimed a spot at the bar, a scarred piece of metal that had probably been salvaged from a decommissioned starship. Grex moved behind it with surprising grace for someone his size, already reaching for a bottle of amber liquid. "This'll put hair on your chest," the Taraxian said, pouring a generous measure. "Or burn it off." Never been entirely sure which. As Marcus lifted the glass, movement caught his eye. A slender figure weaved between the tables, carrying a tray of drinks. And despite the cantina's dim lighting, there was no mistaking the distinctive appearance of a Valori. Her skin held the characteristic pale blue luminescence of her people, almost seeming to glow in the shadows, while silver hair cascaded down her back in gentle waves. Even in the rough environment of the trading post, she moved with an innate elegance that seemed to belong among palace gardens rather than serving drinks to spacers and miners. Marcus found himself watching as she delivered orders to a table of particularly rough-looking characters. One of them, a scarred human with cybernetic implants covering half his face, grabbed her wrist as she turned to leave. "Where's the rush, sweetheart?" The man slurred, alcohol thick in his voice. "Sit with us for a while. We've got credits to spend." The Velori woman's expression remained carefully neutral, but Marcus could see the tension in her shoulders. "Please let me go, Voss. I have other customers waiting." "They can wait," Voss growled, his grip visibly tightening. His companions laughed and made crude comments, encouraging their leader's behavior. "You Velori girls are supposed to be friendly. Show us some of that famous hospitality." Marcus felt his jaw clench. He'd seen scenes like this play out on dozens of worlds, and they never ended well for the person being harassed. The smart thing would be to mind his own business. He was stranded on an unfamiliar planet with a broken ship and limited resources. Getting involved in local disputes was the absolute last thing he needed, but there were some things that transcended common sense, and basic human decency was one of them. He set down his drink and stood, approaching the table with deceptively casual steps. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying just enough edge to get everyone's attention. "The lady asked you to let her go." The cantina grew quieter as nearby patrons sensed trouble brewing. Voss released the woman's wrist and slowly turned to face Marcus, his cybernetic eye whirring as it focused and refocused. "Mind your own business, stranger," Voss said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "This is between me and the blue skin." Marcus shrugged, maintaining his relaxed posture while his mind calculated angles and distances. "See, that's where you're wrong. When you put your hands on someone who doesn't want to be touched, you make it everyone's business." The Velori woman's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing her features before her expression smoothed back to careful neutrality. Voss stood slowly, revealing that he towered over Marcus by at least 6 inches. His companions spread out, forming a loose semicircle that had become uncomfortably familiar over the years. "You know what we do to do-gooders on Veloria Prime?" Voss asked, cracking his knuckles with deliberate menace. Marcus smiled, the expression holding no warmth whatsoever. "Let me guess. Something unoriginal and painful?" The first punch came exactly as he expected, a telegraphed right cross that Marcus ducked easily. He countered with a sharp uppercut to Voss's solar plexus, finding the nerve cluster that would drop most humanoids. The cybernetically enhanced thug doubled over with a wheeze, and chaos erupted. Marcus moved with practiced efficiency, using his environment and his opponent's overconfidence against them. A chair became a weapon, a table became a shield, and years of frontier experience served him well. He wasn't the biggest or strongest fighter in the galaxy, but he was fast, smart, and absolutely ruthless when the situation called for it. When the dust settled, Voss and his crew lay groaning among overturned furniture. Marcus stood in the center of the destruction, breathing hard but relatively unscathed, save for split knuckles, and what would undoubtedly become a spectacular bruise along his jaw. The cantina remained silent for a heartbeat before conversations slowly resumed. Apparently, bar fights weren't unusual enough to warrant extended attention from the clientele. The Velori woman approached him, those luminous eyes studying him with a mixture of curiosity and concern. Up close, her features were even more striking. High cheekbones, an elegant neck, and lips that seemed to hold secrets he desperately wanted to discover. "That was incredibly foolish," she said, her voice carrying the musical quality typical of her species. "Voss works for the Crimson Syndicate. They'll come looking for you now." Marcus flexed his bruised knuckles and winced. "You're welcome." A hint of a smile touched her lips before disappearing. "I didn't ask for your help." "No," he agreed. "You didn't? Got a name?" She hesitated for a moment, as if the simple question held hidden depths. "Zara," she said finally. Zara Moonwhisper. And you've just made yourself the most wanted man on Veloria Prime. Stranger. Marcus Vale, he replied, glancing at the groaning forms of his recent opponents. How long before their friends show up? Not long, Zara said, looking around the cantina with practiced caution. You should leave, now, Marcus grimaced, thinking of his damaged ship sitting in the desert sand. My vessel's grounded? I'm not going anywhere for a while. Something shifted in Zara's expression, calculation replacing caution. Then you'll need somewhere to hide until you can arrange repairs. She paused, seeming to wrestle with an internal decision. I finish my shift in an hour. Meet me behind the cantina if you want to live through the night. Before Marcus could respond, she was gone, gliding between the tables as if nothing had happened. He watched her go, wondering if he'd just been offered salvation or led into an even more dangerous trap. Either way, with his ship damaged and enemies already hunting him, he didn't have the luxury of being picky about his options. He tossed some extra credits on the bar to cover the damage and made his way to the back exit, stepping into the cooling desert air as Veloria Prime's twin suns painted the sky in shades of amber and crimson. Whatever came next, Marcus had a feeling his life had just taken a dramatic turn, and somehow the beautiful Velori woman with secrets in her eyes was going to be at the center of it all. The desert air carried a chill that seemed impossible. After the day's scorching heat, as Marcus waited behind the stellar rest, Veloria Prime's twin moons had risen, casting everything in an ethereal silver-blue glow that transformed the ramshackle trading post into something almost magical. He kept one hand near his blaster, old habits dying hard even in such beauty. The back door opened with barely a whisper, and Zara slipped out like a ghost. She'd changed from her serving outfit into form-fitting travel clothes that somehow made her even more breathtaking. In the moonlight, her pale blue skin seemed to pulse with its own inner light, and Marcus found himself staring again. You actually waited, she said, sounding genuinely surprised. Where else was I going to go? Marcus replied with a self-deprecating smile. My ship's held together with prayers and spare parts, and I've apparently made enemies of the local crime syndicate. Not exactly spoiled for options. Zara studied him for a long moment, those luminous eyes seeming to see straight through him. Follow me, and try to be quiet. Sound carries far in the desert. She led him through a maze of narrow pathways between storage units and temporary shelters. The trading post was larger than it appeared from the outside, with hidden communities tucked away from the main thoroughfares. Occasionally they passed other beings, mostly aliens, Marcus didn't recognize, who nodded respectfully to Zara, but watched him with obvious suspicion. Popular with the locals, Marcus observed quietly. I've been here longer than most, she replied without elaboration. People trust me. They eventually reached the outskirts of the settlement, where a small dome-shaped structure sat partially buried in the sand. It looked like standard prefab housing, but Marcus noticed the subtle modifications: reinforced walls, energy shielding, and what appeared to be a sophisticated security system. Home, Zara said simply, pressing her palm to a scanner. The door slid open with a soft hiss. The interior was a pleasant surprise. While compact, it was beautifully arranged with flowing fabrics in blues and silvers that complemented Zara's natural coloring. Soft lighting emanated from crystals embedded in the walls, clearly Velori technology. A small kitchen occupied one corner, while the rest of the space served as a living area filled with books, artwork, and what looked like advanced scientific equipment. This is not what I expected from a cantina worker, Marcus said, running his fingers along what appeared to be a quantum resonance analyzer. Zara's shoulders tensed slightly. I have varied interests, and expensive tastes, apparently. He gestured to the sophisticated electronics. That's military-grade sensor equipment. The kind of thing that costs more than most people make in a year. She turned to face him, conflict clear in her expression. You ask a lot of questions, Marcus Vale. Occupational hazard. In my line of work, knowing who you're dealing with can mean the difference between profit and a plasma bolt to the chest. And what exactly is your line of work? She countered. You fight like someone with military training, but you carry yourself like a traitor. Your ship is old but well maintained, suggesting either poverty or the desire to avoid attention. Which is it? Marcus laughed despite himself. Touché. Let's just say I transport things from one place to another, and sometimes the previous owners aren't entirely happy about the arrangement. A smuggler. Then, a freelancer with flexible ethics, he corrected. There's a difference. Zara moved to the kitchen area, her movements graceful and economical. Are you hungry? I have some actual food, not the processed protein they serve at the cantina. I could eat, Marcus admitted, settling into a chair that adjusted automatically to his body. Thank you. For this, I mean. You didn't have to help me. No, she agreed, pulling ingredients from what appeared to be a stasis field. I didn't, but you helped me first, even though you had no reason to. They fell into a comfortable routine as she prepared the meal. Marcus found himself relaxing for the first time since landing on Veloria Prime, watching Zara work with practiced efficiency. She seemed different here in her own space, less guarded, more at ease. When she laughed at one of his stories about past misadventures, the sound was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. The food, when it came, was extraordinary. Delicate flavors that seemed to dance on his tongue, preparations that spoke of refined tastes and expensive ingredients. This was not the cooking of a simple serving girl. Where did you learn to cook like this? He asked between bites. Zara's fork paused halfway to her mouth. My mother taught me. She believed that creating beauty, whether in food, art, or music, was one of the highest forms of expression. She sounds wise. Is she still ? She died when I was young, Zara said quietly. A transport accident. At least, that's what they told me. There was something in her tone that suggested the story was more complicated, but Marcus didn't press. Everyone had secrets, especially out here on the frontier. As they ate, the conversation flowed easily between them. Marcus found himself sharing more than he'd intended. Stories of his travels, the loneliness of life aboard a cargo vessel, the constant uncertainty of never knowing where the next job would take him. Zara listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions that revealed a sharp intelligence and worldly knowledge that seemed at odds with her supposed background. When they finished eating, she led him to a set of cushions arranged near a large window that looked out over the desert. The twin moons were directly overhead now, their combined light turning the sand dunes into a sea of silver. It's beautiful, Marcus said, and he meant it. Veloria Prime gets a bad reputation because of places like this, Zara said, settling beside him close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. But the world itself is magnificent. The crystal canyons in the northern hemisphere sing when the wind blows through them. The aurora storms that dance around the polar regions can be seen from orbit. You sound like you've traveled extensively. She was quiet for so long that Marcus thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I used to live a very different life, Marcus. Before I came here, I was someone else entirely. He turned to face her, noting the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands clasped tightly in her lap. We all have pasts we'd rather forget, do we? She met his gaze, and in her eyes he saw pain, regret, and something else. Hope, perhaps. What if your past wasn't something you could forget? What if it followed you across the galaxy, no matter how far you ran? Then maybe it's time to stop running, he said softly. They were sitting very close now, close enough that he could see the intricate patterns of bioluminescence that played across her skin. like living tattoos that shifted with her emotions. Close enough to smell the subtle floral scent that seemed natural to her species. Close enough that when she leaned toward him, it felt like the most natural thing in the galaxy. "Marcus," she whispered, and his name on her lips sounded like music. "Yeah? I'm not who you think I am. I don't care," he said, and realized he meant it completely. The kiss, when it came, was gentle at first, a tentative exploration of boundaries and possibilities. But as she responded, her arms coming up to encircle his neck, it deepened into something hungry and urgent. Her skin seemed to grow brighter under his touch, the bioluminescent patterns intensifying as her pulse quickened. They broke apart breathless, foreheads touching as they shared the same air. "This is dangerous," she said, though she made no move to pull away. "Everything worthwhile is dangerous. You don't understand. If certain people knew I was here, knew that you were with me ... then we'll deal with it together," Marcus said, cupping her face in his hands. The skin was softer than silk, and warm in a way that seemed to come from within. "I've faced worse odds. Have you?" she asked, and there was something almost desperate in her voice. "Marcus, I need to tell you something. About who I really am. About why I'm here." Before he could respond, a soft chime sounded from somewhere in the dwelling. Zara stiffened, all the warmth leaving her expression as she became alert and focused. "What is it?" Marcus asked, his hand instinctively moving toward his weapon. "Motion sensors," she said, already moving toward a control panel. "Someone's approaching the perimeter." The display showed multiple heat signatures moving through the desert, still several hundred meters away, but closing fast. Too organized to be scavengers, too numerous to be casual visitors. "Vos?" Marcus asked. "No," Zara said, her voice tight with something that sounded like fear. "These are Valori signatures. Someone from home has found me." She turned to him, and in her eyes he saw terror, warring with resignation. "Marcus, there's something I have to tell you, and we may not have much time. My name isn't just Zara Moonwhisper. It's Princess Zara Moonwhisper of the Celestial Court. I'm not a cantina worker, hiding from criminals. I'm a royal heir, hiding from an arranged marriage that would seal a peace treaty between warring clans." Marcus stared at her, pieces of the puzzle suddenly clicking into place. The expensive equipment, the refined manners, the extensive knowledge of galactic politics. "You're royalty." "I was," she said, "until I decided I'd rather serve drinks in a frontier cantina than spend my life as a political pawn. But it seems my family has finally tracked me down." The motion sensors chimed again, the signatures now close enough to make out individual figures. 6 of them, moving with military precision toward Zara's hidden sanctuary. "What do you want to do?" Marcus asked, checking his weapon. Zara looked at him with something like wonder. "You're not running. Should I be?" "Most people would. Getting involved with Valori royal politics is a good way to end up dead." Marcus smiled, the expression fierce and determined. "Princess, I've been in worse trouble for much worse reasons. Besides," he moved closer to her, close enough to see the hope blooming in her luminous eyes, "I think I might be falling for you, royal blood or not. That means your problems are my problems now." The approaching figures were close enough, now that they could hear voices carried on the desert wind, speaking in the melodious language of the Valori. Zara's expression hardened with resolve as she moved to another panel, activating defensive systems that transformed her peaceful dwelling into a fortress. "In that case," she said, turning back to him with a smile that was equal parts gratitude and determination, "let me tell you about the man they sent to bring me home. His name is Thane Starfire, and he's the best tracker in the Celestial Fleet. He's also the man I was supposed to marry." Outside, the voices grew closer, and Marcus realized that their quiet evening of discovery and growing attraction was about to become something much more complicated. But as he looked at Zara, really looked at her, seeing not just the beautiful alien woman, but the brave princess who'd chosen freedom over duty. He knew he wouldn't have it any other way. The hunt for Princess Zara Moonwhisperer was over. Now the question was whether love could triumph over the political machinations of an entire star system. The silence that followed Zara's revelation stretched between them like a taut wire. Outside, the Valori voices grew closer, their melodious tones carrying an unmistakable note of authority. Marcus found himself studying the woman beside him with new eyes. The way she held herself, the unconscious grace in every movement, the quiet command in her voice, even when whispering. How had he missed the signs of nobility? "A princess," he said finally, more to himself than to her. "I rescued a princess from a cantina brawl." "You rescued a woman," Zara corrected, her luminous eyes intense. "The princess died the day I left the celestial court. What you see now is who I choose to be." Before Marcus could respond, a new voice cut through the night air, deeper than the others, carrying easily across the desert, despite speaking in normal conversational tones. The language was Valori, but something in the cadence made Marcus's hand drift instinctively to his weapon. "Zara Moonwhisperer of the Silver Palace, daughter of the Celestial Court," the voice called in accented standard. "By the authority of the High Council and the bonds of honor that bind our houses, I call upon you to show yourself. I am Thane Starfire, and I have come to bring you home." Zara's entire body went rigid. Even her skin's bioluminescence seemed to dim, as if she were trying to make herself invisible. "He's here," she whispered. "After 3 years, they finally sent him." "The fiancé?" Marcus asked. "Former fiancé," she corrected quickly. "The betrothal was arranged when we were children. I never consented to it as an adult." Through the dwelling's reinforced windows, Marcus caught his first glimpse of the approaching party. 6 figures moved across the desert with fluid grace, their forms barely disturbing the sand despite the speed of their approach. Even in the moonlight, he could make out the distinctive tall, elegant builds of the Valori, their pale skin seeming to glow with the same inner light as Zara's. The one in the lead was clearly Thane, taller than the others, moving with the confident stride of someone accustomed to command. As he drew closer, Marcus could see he was younger than expected, perhaps in his early 30s by human standards. His silver hair was shorter than Zara's, bound back in a warrior's knot, and even from a distance, Marcus could see the family resemblance that marked him as high nobility. "Princess Zara," Thane continued, now close enough that they could see him clearly. "I know you are here. Your energy signature is ... distinctive. I have no wish to disturb the peace of this settlement, but I will not leave without you. The treaty hangs in the balance, and our people need you." "What treaty?" Marcus asked quietly. Zara closed her eyes, pain etched across her features. "The Crimson Nebula Accords. 2 of the most powerful Valori houses have been locked in a blood feud for generations. My marriage to Thane was supposed to unite them, end the war that's been tearing our sector apart." "How many lives?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he didn't want to know the answer. "Millions over the past century, and millions more if the fighting continues." She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. "Do you understand now? This isn't just about my personal freedom. My choice to run away condemned countless people to continued bloodshed." The weight of it settled on Marcus like a physical thing. This wasn't a simple romance between a smuggler and a runaway princess. This was about interstellar politics, ancient feuds, and the lives of entire worlds hanging in the balance. "Princess?" Thane called again, and this time there was a note of something almost like pleading in his voice. "I would speak with you. Alone, if you prefer. There are developments you should know about." Zara moved to the communication panel, her fingers hovering over the controls that would allow her to respond. "I could tell him to leave," she said quietly. "The defenses here are strong enough to hold them off for a while. You could make it back to your ship, get the repairs you need, and leave you to face this alone? Marcus shook his head. Not happening, Princess. We're in this together, remember? She turned to stare at him, something like amazement in her expression. You understand what you're saying? If you stand with me against Thane, you're standing against the entire celestial fleet. They have ships that could turn this planet to glass. Then maybe it's time someone stood up to them, Marcus said with more confidence than he felt. Besides, I'm curious about these developments, he mentioned. Aren't you? Zara studied him for a long moment, then activated the external speakers. Thane, she said, her voice carrying the clear, commanding tone of someone born to rule. You may approach alone. Your companions remain where they are. Agreed, came the immediate reply. And Princess, there is much we need to discuss. Through the security monitors, they watched as Thane spoke briefly with his escort, before continuing toward the dwelling alone. Up close, Marcus had to admit the man was impressive, tall even for a Valori, moving with the fluid grace of a trained warrior, wearing travel clothes that somehow managed to look elegant despite the desert journey. His face was angular and aristocratic, marked by the same high cheekbones and luminous eyes as Zara, though his held a gravity that spoke of heavy burdens carried. Zara opened the door before he could announce himself, and Marcus found himself face to face with Valori nobility for the second time that night. Thane was younger than his voice had suggested, perhaps only a few years older than Zara herself, but he carried himself with the weight of ancient responsibility. Princess, Thane said formally, executing a bow that managed to be respectful without being servile. You look well. I look like a cantina worker, because that's what I am now, Zara replied, though Marcus noticed she unconsciously straightened, her own noble bearing reasserting itself. What are these developments you mentioned? Thane's luminous gaze shifted to Marcus, studying him with the intensity of a predator evaluating potential prey. And you are the human who has been assisting. The princess? Marcus Vale, Marcus replied, not bothering to hide his own assessment of Valori noble. And yes, I've been helping her. Problem with that? Several, actually, Thane said, with what might have been the ghost of a smile. But they are not immediate concerns. He turned back to Zara. Princess, your sister Vera has volunteered to take your place in the marriage contract. The words hit Zara like a physical blow. She staggered backward, one hand reaching out to steady herself against the wall. Vera? She's barely 18. 18 is of age by Valori law, Thane said gently. And she is determined. She believes it is her duty to preserve the peace you abandoned. No. Zara's voice was flat, final. I won't let her sacrifice her life to clean up my mess. Then return with me, Thane said. And for the first time, Marcus heard genuine emotion in his voice. Take up the responsibilities you were born to carry. The treaty can still be salvaged. The war ended. The bloodshed stopped. I'm marrying you, Marcus said, the words tasting bitter. Thane turned to him, and Marcus was surprised to see something almost like sympathy in those alien eyes. By fulfilling an obligation that predates both of us. Do you think I desired this any more than she did? I have spent 3 years tracking the woman I was supposed to wed, knowing that when I found her, I would be dragging her back to a life she despised. Then don't, Marcus said simply. Excuse me? Don't take her back. Tell your High Council she's dead. Tell them she was killed in a transport accident, or by pirates, or by a plague. Tell them whatever you need to tell them, but let her stay free. Thane stared at him for a long moment, then actually laughed, a sound like silver bells in a gentle wind. You are either very brave or very foolish, Marcus Vale. Probably both. But you misunderstand the situation. This is not about what I want, or what Princess Zara wants, or even what you want. This is about preventing a war that will consume entire star systems. There has to be another way, Zara said, but her voice lacked conviction. If there is, I have not found it, Thane replied. I have spent 3 years searching for alternatives, consulting with diplomats, strategists, even historians. The blood feud between House Moonwhisper and House Starfire has roots that go back centuries. Only a marriage alliance has the symbolic power to end it. Marcus looked between them, seeing the pain in Zara's eyes, the reluctant duty in Thane's posture. An idea began to form, dangerous, probably impossible, but potentially brilliant. What if the marriage alliance didn't have to be between the two of you? He asked slowly. Both Velori turned to stare at him. I'm listening, Thane said carefully. You said the feud is between House Moonwhisper and House Starfire. The alliance needs to be symbolic, right? It needs to show that the old hatreds are dead, that a new era of cooperation has begun. Yes, Zara said, though she looked puzzled. But Marcus, what are you suggesting? Marcus took a deep breath, knowing he was about to either save the woman he was falling in love with or get them all killed. I'm suggesting that maybe the alliance doesn't need to be between existing nobility. What if it was between the houses and someone new? Someone with no ties to the old feuds? No ancient grudges to carry forward? You're talking about yourself, Thane said, his voice dangerously quiet. I'm talking about a new kind of treaty, Marcus replied. One that doesn't sacrifice anyone's freedom for the sake of politics. One that creates genuine bonds instead of forced ones. Zara was staring at him with something like wonder. Marcus, you don't understand what you're saying. To marry into Velori nobility, to become part of the treaty structure, you'd be giving up your freedom too. You'd be tied to our politics, our conflicts, our future. Would I be tied to you? He asked simply. The question hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility and danger. Outside, the wind had picked up, carrying the voices of Thane's waiting escorts, and the distant sounds of the trading post settling into sleep. This is madness, Thane said finally, but Marcus noticed he didn't sound entirely opposed to the idea. Maybe, Marcus agreed, but it's also a chance for everyone to get what they really want. Zara gets to choose her own path. Your sister doesn't have to sacrifice her future. The houses get their alliance, and the war ends. The only question is whether you're willing to think outside the boundaries of tradition. Thane looked at Zara, something unreadable passing between them. Princess, is this what you want? To bind yourself to this human, to tie his fate to our people's future? Zara met Marcus's eyes, and in her luminous gaze he saw fear, hope, love, and a dozen other emotions warring for dominance. I want to be free to choose, she said finally. And if I choose him, if he's willing to accept the responsibilities that come with that choice, then yes, that's what I want. The High Council will never accept it, Thane said, but his tone suggested he was thinking it through rather than dismissing it outright. They'll accept it if you present it to them, Marcus said. You're here as their representative, right? You have authority to negotiate terms? Limited authority, Thane admitted. But perhaps enough. He looked back and forth between them, calculation replacing skepticism. There would be conditions, tests to prove worthiness, ceremonies to legitimize the union, political obligations that would bind you both to the fate of our people. We understand, Zara said, reaching for Marcus's hand. Her skin was warm, pulsing gently with bioluminescent patterns that seemed to respond to his touch. Do you? Thane asked, his voice growing serious. Marcus Vale, if you truly intend this course, you must understand that you would not simply be marrying a woman. You would be wedding yourself to an entire civilization, accepting responsibility for the lives and welfare of billions of beings. The decisions you make, the actions you take, could affect the balance of power across multiple star systems. Are you prepared for that burden? Marcus looked at Zara, seeing in her face the same determination that had led her to abandon a palace for a cantina, the same courage that let her stand up to Voss and his thugs, the same strength that had carried her through 3 years of exile. He thought about his life of drifting from job to job, never putting down roots, never making commitments that lasted longer than the next hyperspace jump. Maybe it was time to stop running from responsibility. Maybe it was time to find something worth fighting for. I'm prepared, he said, and meant it. Thane studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Very well. I will contact the High Council and present your proposal. But understand, if they reject it, Princess Zara must return with me. Her sister's life hangs in the balance. And if they accept it? Zara asked. Then you will both come with me to the Celestial Court, where you will undergo the trials necessary to prove your worthiness for this union. A process is ... demanding. Many do not survive it. Marcus squeezed Zara's hand, drawing strength from her touch. We'll face it together, as if summoned by his words. A new sound cut through the desert night, the distinctive whine of ship engines powering up. All 3 of them turned toward the source, and through the window they could see lights moving across the trading post. That would be Captain Riven, Thane said calmly. My ship commander. He's preparing the stellar wind for departure. He looked at Marcus and Zara with something that might have been respect. It seems we have much to discuss during the journey to the Celestial Court. I hope, for all our sakes, that your love is stronger than the forces that will try to tear it apart. As the desert wind carried the promise of change and the scent of distant stars, Marcus realized that his simple crash landing on Veloria Prime had just become the beginning of something far greater than he'd ever imagined. The question now, whether a smuggler's heart and a princess's courage would be enough to forge a new destiny among the stars. The hunt for Princess Zara Moonwhisper was over. The trial of Marcus Vale and Zara's love was about to begin.